The darkness was spreading across the galaxy like a deadly disease. One by one, entire star systems simply disappeared, leaving nothing but empty space where millions of beings once lived. The Zephyrian Confederacy, a peaceful alliance of 12 different alien species, was running out of time and running out of hope. Commander Velthor stood on the bridge of what might be the last orbital station in their territory. His 4 eyes were fixed on the massive viewing screen showing the planet Zarian below. Just this morning, it had been home to 3 billion Altarians. Now, strange mechanical creatures called void harvesters were tearing it apart, piece by piece. The planet's surface glowed red as the machines consumed everything: cities, forests, even the oceans. "Sir, we're getting reports from all sectors," said Kreeth, the communications officer. His voice shook with fear. "The harvester fleet has reached the outer colonies. They're moving faster than before. Our ships can't escape them anymore." Velt closed his eyes. For thousands of years, the Confederacy had lived in peace. Their advanced energy weapons were designed to disable enemy ships, not destroy them. Their shields were meant to protect, not to wage war. But these mechanical monsters didn't negotiate or show mercy. They simply consumed everything in their path. "Admiral, the defense fleet from Sector 7 just went silent," another officer reported. "That's the 3rd fleet we've lost this week." The truth was becoming clear to everyone on the bridge. Their beautiful, elegant weapons were completely useless against these machines. Every time they fired their energy beams, the harvester's shields adapted and became stronger. Every strategy they tried, the machines learned and countered. They were fighting an enemy that got smarter with every battle. Velthar had heard the whispers and legends from traders who traveled to the edge of known space. Stories about a species from a world so dangerous that just surviving there made them incredibly strong and violent. A species that other civilizations called Deathworlders, because they came from a planet that constantly tried to kill them. Most civilized species thought these stories were just myths. After all, how could any intelligent life form evolve on a world covered in poison, extreme weather, and deadly predators? But now, with his people facing complete extinction, Velthar was willing to try anything. "Open a channel to the Sol system," he ordered quietly. His officers stared at him in shock. "Sir? You can't be serious," Kreeth whispered. "Those creatures, if the stories are true, they're more dangerous than the harvesters." "Maybe," Velthar replied, watching another section of Zarian disappear into the machine's hungry maws. "But, at least they're alive. Send the message." The message arrived at Earth's Luna Defense Station at 0347 hours, interrupting Admiral Jinwoo's morning coffee. What started as a routine day quickly became the most important moment in human history. The transmission was unlike anything they had ever received: desperate, alien, and carrying data that made even the most experienced officers go pale. Captain Minji rushed into the command center, her tablet displaying preliminary translation. "Results. Sir, you need to see this immediately. We're receiving a distress signal from somewhere beyond the outer rim. Our computers are still working on the language, but the basic message is clear: they need help." Jinwoo set down his cup and studied the incoming data. The aliens had included visual records of their war, and what he saw made his blood run cold. Entire planets were being stripped bare by mechanical swarms that moved like locusts across star systems. Cities that had stood for thousands of years were reduced to nothing in hours. "These void harvesters," Minji continued, "they appear to be some kind of self-replicating machine intelligence. They consume everything: planets, ships, even stars. And sir, according to their data, they're heading in our general direction." The translation team worked around the clock to decode the full message. What they discovered painted a terrifying picture of galactic civilization collapsing. 12 different alien species, all advanced and peaceful, were being systematically destroyed. Their energy-based weapons couldn't penetrate the machine's adaptive shields. Their elegant battle tactics were useless against an enemy that learned and evolved with every encounter. Jinwoo knew the Human Colonial Council would spend weeks debating whether to get involved. Politicians would argue about resources, risks, and whether humanity should interfere in alien affairs. But as a military commander, he understood something the politicians didn't. These machines wouldn't stop at alien space. Eventually they would reach Earth. "Captain, I want you to pull up our defense protocols," he ordered, "and get me a direct line to Colonel Dong-Su. If we're going to help these aliens, we'll need someone who understands ground combat." While the politicians debated, Jinwoo began quietly preparing humanity's response. The Terran Defense Fleet started loading supplies and ammunition, not the clean energy weapons that most advanced civilizations used, but old-fashioned kinetic rounds, explosive warheads, and chemical weapons that humans had been perfecting for centuries. Sir Minji asked quietly, "Do you really think we can make a difference? These aliens seem far more advanced than us. If their weapons can't stop these machines, what makes you think ours can?" Jinwoo smiled grimly as he watched the fleet preparations. "Because, Captain, they've never fought anything like humans before. They've been fighting a civilized war. We're about to show them what happens when you threaten a Deathworld species." The Zephyrian command staff watched in stunned silence as the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace. They had expected sleek vessels like their own, with smooth curves and gleaming hulls that reflected their advanced civilization. Instead, they saw something that looked like it belonged in a museum of ancient warfare. The human ships were ugly by galactic standards. Dark gray hulls covered in thick armor plating, scarred from countless battles, instead of elegant energy projectors. These vessels bristled with crude-looking tubes and barrels that the aliens barely recognized as weapons. Some ships even had what appeared to be massive hammers mounted on their fronts. "Those are kinetic weapons?" asked Science Coordinator Zithel, his voice filled with disbelief. "But those went out of use thousands of years ago. Why would an advanced species still use such primitive technology?" Engineer Hyunwoo smiled as he prepared the demonstration. He had volunteered to show the aliens exactly why humans still preferred primitive weapons. A piece of harvester hull, the same material that had shrugged off the Confederacy's most powerful energy beams, sat mounted on the testing platform. "Watch closely," Hyunwoo said, activating the portable railgun. "Your energy weapons are designed to be clean and precise. They heat up targets or disrupt their molecular structure. Very civilized, very controlled." The aliens nodded. Their weapons were works of art, designed to disable rather than destroy, to capture rather than kill. Even in war, they maintained their principles of minimizing damage and preserving life when possible. "Our weapons have a different philosophy," Hyunwoo continued, charging the railgun. "We don't try to be neat or precise. We just want to put very large holes in things that are trying to kill us." He fired. The tungsten projectile hit the harvester hull fragment at nearly 30,000 kilometers per hour. The result was instantaneous and spectacular. The alien metal, which had absorbed every energy attack thrown at it, simply exploded into vapor and debris. The shockwave rattled equipment throughout the testing bay. The Zephyrian observers stood in shocked silence, staring at the empty space where the supposedly indestructible material had been moments before. "How is this possible?" Zitho whispered. "Our scientists studied that whole composition for months. Nothing we tried could even scratch it." Hyunwoo powered down the railgun and turned to face his alien audience. His expression was matter-of-fact, as if he had just demonstrated something perfectly ordinary. "The answer is simple," he said. "You come from peaceful worlds where the biggest dangers are other civilized species who fight with rules and honor. We come from Earth, a planet covered in volcanoes, poisonous creatures, extreme weather, and natural disasters that could wipe out entire cities." He gestured toward the debris scattered across the testing bay. "For millions of years, our world tried to kill us every single day. Earthquakes, floods, predators, diseases, ice ages, everything on our planet wanted us dead. So we learned the most important lesson of all. The aliens leaned forward, waiting for this revelation from the Deathworlders. We learned to kill back, and we learned to be very, very good at it. The training ground fell silent as Colonel Suyang addressed the mixed group of human soldiers and alien warriors. The Altarians stood tall and proud in their ceremonial battle armor, while the Zephrarians held their elegant energy staffs with practiced grace. They all carried themselves like knights from ancient Earth legends, ready to fight with dignity and honor. The humans, by contrast, looked like they had just crawled out of a mud pit. Their armor was practical rather than beautiful, covered in extra ammunition pouches and improvised modifications. Where the aliens carried single, refined weapons, the humans bristled with knives, grenades, backup guns, and tools that could double as weapons in a pinch. "All right, listen up," Suyang began, pacing in front of the assembled troops. "I know you've all been fighting these harvester machines for months, with no real success. Today, we're going to teach you why that is, and what you need to do differently." An Altarian commander stepped forward, his blue skin shimmering with pride. "Colonel, with respect, we have been warriors for over 2,000 years. Our combat traditions are older than your entire civilization. We know how to fight." Suyang nodded politely. "I'm sure you do. You know how to fight other civilized species who follow rules and care about honor. But these machines don't care about your traditions. They don't respect your courage or admire your skill. They just want to tear you apart and use your atoms to build more of themselves." She activated a holographic display showing recent battle footage. The aliens watched their own forces engaging the harvesters with textbook precision, maintaining formation, targeting vital systems, retreating in good order when overwhelmed. It was beautiful, disciplined, and completely ineffective. "You fight like you're in a tournament," Suyang continued. "Clean, organized, honorable. That's fine when your enemy plays by the same rules. But when you're fighting for survival, honor becomes a luxury you can't afford." The first joint exercise was a disaster. The aliens insisted on maintaining proper formation, even when it meant exposing themselves to enemy fire. They refused to target non-military systems, even when destroying them would cripple the harvester forces. Most frustrating of all, they kept trying to capture rather than destroy their mechanical enemies. Lieutenant Jayan watched the chaos and shook his head. During a brief pause in the exercise, he gathered his squad and pointed to a pile of mining equipment left over from a recent asteroid operation. "See that stuff? We can turn it into bombs. The harvesters won't expect it, because it's not actually a weapon." His soldiers grinned and got to work, while the aliens watched in horrified fascination as the humans began building explosive devices out of industrial tools. When the exercise resumed, everything changed. Jegan's improvised bombs caught the harvester drones completely off guard. The machine's learning algorithms had no data on mining charges being used as weapons, so they couldn't adapt their defenses in time. "This is cheating," protested a Zephyrian officer as he watched human soldiers use decoy signals to lure harvesters into traps. "Exactly," Suyang replied with a grim smile. "Welcome to human warfare." The rescue mission to Station Kepler 7 was supposed to be a simple extraction. Intelligence reports showed a few hundred Confederacy civilians trapped inside, while harvester drones systematically dismantled the outer sections. What the humans found when they breached the station's hull was far worse than anyone had imagined. Thousands of alien families were huddled in the central compartments, including hundreds of children from 6 different species. The harvesters had cut off life support to most sections, and many of the refugees were injured, sick, or dying from exposure to toxic gases that had leaked from damaged systems. Medical Officer Yunbi took one look at the situation and immediately began treating the wounded, starting with the smallest victims. She worked without stopping for over 14 hours, using human medical supplies to save alien children whose biology she barely understood. When her equipment ran out, she improvised treatments using whatever materials the rescue teams could find. "Ma'am, we need to move," urged Sergeant Minho, as harvester drones began cutting through the station's inner barriers. "The extraction ship can only wait another 10 minutes before the machines break through our perimeter." Yunbi looked up from the tiny Altarian child she was treating. The little girl's skin was turning from blue to gray, a sign of severe oxygen poisoning in her species. "I'm not leaving her. Find me 5 more minutes." That's when something remarkable happened. Without being ordered, without any formal command structure, every human soldier in the rescue team simply formed a protective circle around the medical bay. They knew they were outnumbered, knew the harvesters were closing in, but not one of them suggested abandoning the civilians. Sergeant Minho was hit twice by harvester energy beams while carrying wounded Zephyrians to the escape pods. His armor was melting, his left arm was completely numb, but he kept moving. When a young Altarian male tried to help him, Minho actually pushed the civilian behind cover, taking a third hit that nearly killed him. Healer Cathera, one of the Confederacy's most experienced medical officers, watched all this in complete bewilderment. "I don't understand," she told Dr. Young-ho, as human soldiers continued fighting desperately to protect aliens they had just met. "Why are they doing this? We're not the same species. We're not even from the same part of the galaxy." Dr. Young paused in his work, bandaging a wounded refugee. How could he explain something so fundamental to human nature that most humans didn't even think about it consciously? "It's called pack bonding," he said finally. On Earth, survival meant forming tight groups and protecting each other no matter what. Humans who abandoned their pack died out millions of years ago. The ones who survived were the ones who would rather die than let their group members get hurt. Kethera stared at him. "But we're not your pack. We're aliens." "Doesn't matter," Young-ho replied, returning to his patient. "Once a human decides you're part of their group, that's it. Your family. And humans will do absolutely anything to protect their family." The psychological effect on the Confederacy forces was immediate and profound. For months, they had been fighting a losing battle, watching their people die while their leaders talked about strategic retreats and acceptable losses. Now they had allies who would literally throw themselves into danger to save alien children they had never met before, for the first time since the war began. The Confederacy forces felt hope. The Harvester command ship was massive, easily 10 times larger than anything in the human fleet. Its black hull absorbed energy weapons like a sponge, and its defensive systems had adapted to counter every tactic the Confederacy had tried over the past year. According to all military logic, attempting to board such a vessel was suicide. Captain Sungi studied the tactical display and grinned. "Perfect. They'll never expect us to be stupid enough to try it." Her boarding team consisted of 20 humans armed with cutting tools, explosive charges, and a collection of equipment that would have confused any civilized military force. Instead of advanced hacking devices, they carried crowbars and welding torches. Instead of elegant energy weapons, they packed shotguns loaded with electromagnetic pulse rounds. The Harvester ship's outer hull was designed to resist energy-based cutting tools, but nobody had thought to armor it against a human with a plasma torch and unlimited patience. Sungi's team burned through the supposedly impenetrable barrier in less than 30 minutes, creating an entrance where none was supposed to exist. Inside the ship, they found corridors filled with mechanical drones programmed to respond to specific invasion scenarios. The machines had learned to counter Confederacy boarding tactics, energy weapon attacks, and coordinated assault patterns. What they hadn't learned to handle was humans who made everything up as they went along. "Okay," Team Sunji whispered as they moved through the alien corridors. "Forget everything you learned in training. We're going to wing this." Engineer Junho spotted the first group of defensive drones and immediately did something that violated every rule of combat engineering. Instead of destroying the machines, he plugged a human computer tablet into their control port and started reprogramming them on the spot. "What are you doing?" asked Corporal Hayek, keeping watch while J worked. "Turning them against their friends," Junho replied, his fingers flying over the tablet's screen. "These drones are designed to learn from enemy tactics, but they're not programmed to handle friendly fire from their own side." Within minutes, the reprogrammed drones were attacking their fellow machines, creating chaos throughout the ship's defensive network. The Harvester Collective Intelligence tried to counter this new threat, but how do you program a response to an enemy who uses your own weapons against you in ways that make no logical sense? The human team split up, which was another violation of standard military doctrine. Small groups of 2 or 3 soldiers scattered throughout the ship, each team improvising their own mission objectives. Some planted explosives in random locations, others continued hacking drone units. A few just started breaking things that looked important. "This is insane," reported Lieutenant Sungman over the comm. "I'm in what looks like their main computer core, but instead of trying to access it properly, I'm just going to hit it with a hammer and see what happens." The Harvester collective mind, accustomed to fighting logical, predictable enemies, began experiencing something resembling panic. Every tactical algorithm it deployed was countered by human actions that made no strategic sense. When it reinforced the engine room, the humans attacked the kitchen. When it concentrated defenses around vital systems, the humans started dismantling decorative panels. Sunji reached the bridge and found herself face to face with the ship's central processing unit. Instead of trying to hack it or destroy it with explosives, she did something completely unexpected. She started talking to it. "Hey there, computer, want to see something really interesting?" Then she showed it cat videos from Earth's internet. The resulting computational overload shut down half the ship's systems. The emergency council meeting aboard the Confederacy flagship was chaos. Reports were streaming in from across the galaxy as the main Harvester fleet, nearly 10,000 ships strong, advanced toward the last major population centers. Every defensive strategy had failed, and the aliens were talking about evacuation to distant galaxies. Admiral Jinwoo stood quietly at the back of the room, studying a star chart on his personal tablet, while the alien commanders argued about retreat routes and refugee ships. He was looking at something else entirely, a small, unremarkable planet called Vulcarus Prime. "Admiral," called out Confederacy leader Vexton, "do the humans have any tactical suggestions? We're running out of options." Jinwoo stepped forward and activated the main holographic display, showing the volcanic nightmare that was Vulcarus Prime. The planet's surface was covered in active lava flows, toxic gas clouds, and geological instability that made it shake apart and rebuild itself constantly. "We make our stand here," he announced. The alien commanders stared at him in horror. "That's a death world," protested General Kithmer. "The atmosphere alone would kill most of our species in minutes. The surface temperature exceeds safe limits for our equipment. Nothing can survive there." "Exactly," Jinwoo replied with a grim smile. "We lure the entire Harvester fleet to this planet, and then we show them what happens when you fight humans on a world that reminds us of home." The plan was insane by any civilized standard. Instead of trying to protect their forces from Vulcarus Prime's deadly environment, the humans intended to use the planet itself as a weapon. They had studied the geological surveys and identified thousands of potential volcanic trigger points across the surface. When the Harvester fleet arrived, expecting another easy victory, they found the human ships waiting in low orbit around the hellish planet. The mechanical minds calculated that any battle here would be brief. No organic life form could survive in such conditions for more than a few minutes. They were very, very wrong. The first wave of Harvester ships descended through the toxic atmosphere, their adaptive shields easily handling the corrosive gases that would have dissolved most organic ships in seconds. They landed on the unstable surface, their mechanical legs finding purchase on ground that shifted and cracked beneath them. That's when the humans showed them what environmental warfare really meant. Seismic charges, carefully placed over months of preparation, detonated in precise sequences across the planet's surface. The explosions weren't meant to destroy the harvesters directly. They were meant to wake up the planet itself. Massive volcanic eruptions began chain reacting across 3 continents. Lava flows that had been dormant for decades suddenly burst to the surface, moving faster than the harvester ground forces could retreat. The machines found themselves fighting not just human soldiers, but the planet itself. Human troops, wearing environmental suits designed for Earth's most extreme conditions, moved through the chaos like they were taking a walk in the park. They had trained for this their entire lives. Every human child grew up learning about volcanoes, earthquakes, toxic atmospheres, and extreme weather, because Earth had all of those things. Temperature reading is only 400 degrees Celsius, reported Sergeant Dayoon as his squad advanced through a lava field. Pretty comfortable compared to that training exercise in Australia last year. The Confederacy forces, watching from orbit, in sealed environmental suits, couldn't believe what they were seeing. Humans were actually fighting effectively in conditions that would kill most galactic species instantly. They moved through poisonous gas clouds, used lava flows as cover, and seemed completely unaffected by the constant earthquakes. The harvesters, for the first time in their existence, began to retreat. The sky above Volcaris Prime burned with the light of 10,000 ships locked in desperate combat. The Harvester mothership, a massive construct the size of a small moon, hung in low orbit like a dark cancer against the stars. Its hull bristled with weapons that had destroyed entire civilizations, and its computational power exceeded anything the galaxy had ever seen. But it was losing commander. Taeon watched his tactical display with growing amazement as human ships continued their impossible assault. By every rule of warfare, they should have been obliterated hours ago. The harvesters had superior numbers, better shields, and adaptive technology that should have countered every human tactic. Instead, the mechanical fleet was falling apart. "Sir, we're reading massive system failures across the harvester formation," reported his communications officer. "Their coordination networks are breaking down. They're actually starting to fire on each other." Taeon understood what was happening. The harvester collective intelligence was designed to learn and adapt, but it was built on pure logic and mathematical probability. It could handle any rational enemy, any predictable strategy, any sensible tactical doctrine. Humans weren't sensible. Captain Jiwon's ship was completely disabled, drifting powerless through space with hull breaches on every deck. According to logic, she should have ejected her crew and surrendered. Instead, she used her ship's remaining momentum to ram a harvester cruiser, detonating her reactor at the moment of impact and taking out 3 enemy vessels. Lieutenant Colonel Minsio's ground forces were trapped in a volcanic crater with no hope of rescue. The logical response would have been to negotiate surrender, or at least try to preserve lives. Instead, they used their last explosives to trigger a massive eruption that swallowed an entire harvester landing zone. The mechanical minds couldn't process this behavior. Their algorithms had no parameters for enemies who fought harder when they were losing, who became more dangerous when cornered, who would sacrifice themselves for beings they had only known for weeks. Taeon's own ship, the Soul's Pride, was falling apart around him. His engines were failing, his weapons were offline, and his hull integrity was down to 12%. His crew of 500 was reduced to barely 50 survivors, and half of those were wounded. The rational choice was obvious: retreat, regroup, live to fight another day. "All hands, this is the commander," Taeon announced over the ship's communication system. "We have one shot at this. We're going to ram the mothership's central control node." His remaining crew didn't hesitate. Not one person suggested surrender or retreat. They simply moved to their final positions and prepared to die, taking as many enemies with them as possible. All ships, this is Taeyeon. He broadcast on all frequencies as the Soul's Pride began its final approach. The Harvester defensive systems fired everything they had, but the human vessel kept coming, trailing atmosphere and debris. For the Confederacy, for our pack. The Harvester collective intelligence made its final, fatal error. Faced with an enemy that refused to follow logical patterns, it tried to adapt by becoming more aggressive, more decisive, more willing to take risks. In other words, it tried to become more human. The resulting feedback loop crashed every connected system simultaneously, as Taeyeon's ship struck the mothership's command center. 10,000 Harvester vessels suddenly found themselves without coordination, without central control, without the collective intelligence that had made them unstoppable. The explosion that followed lit up the entire star system, marking the end of the mechanical plague and the beginning of a new era of galactic cooperation. The silence that followed the great battle was almost as overwhelming as the noise had been. Across 12 star systems, the wreckage of Harvester fleets drifted cold and lifeless through space. For the first time in over a year, the galaxy was quiet. The mechanical plague that had consumed entire civilizations was finally dead. Captain Boyang stood on the bridge of her damaged ship, looking out at the debris field that had once been the most feared military force in galactic history. Her uniform was torn and stained with blood, some of it hers, some of it from alien allies she had carried to safety. Around her, the mixed crew of humans and Confederacy survivors worked together to coordinate rescue operations. The formal ceremony took place 3 months later aboard the newly constructed Unity Station, built from the combined technologies of all 13 species. Representatives from across the galaxy had gathered to witness something unprecedented: the unanimous decision to invite a Deathworld species into the Galactic Confederacy. Boyong walked slowly to the podium, still recovering from injuries sustained during the final battle. The massive assembly hall fell completely silent as she approached the microphone. Thousands of beings from dozens of species watched her, many seeing a human up close for the first time. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. "3 months ago, you called us monsters. You whispered stories about the violent Deathworlders who came from a planet so dangerous that it turned its children into predators." She paused, looking out at the sea of alien faces, some grateful, some still nervous, all of them changed forever by what they had witnessed. "You weren't wrong. We are monsters. Earth made us into killers, survivors, warriors who don't know when to quit. But here's what you didn't understand then, and what I hope you understand now. We only become monsters when someone threatens our family." The hall remained perfectly quiet. You could hear the soft hum of the station's life support systems, the distant sound of construction work as the galaxy began rebuilding itself. "We didn't come to your aid because you asked politely. We didn't fight the Harvesters because of some noble ideal about galactic peace. We saved you because the moment you called for help, you became our pack. And humans will die before they let their pack come to harm." The standing ovation that followed lasted for nearly 10 minutes, but it wasn't just applause, it was relief, gratitude, and something the Confederacy species had never felt before when looking at predators. It was the feeling of safety that comes from knowing your protectors will never abandon you. In the weeks that followed, human engineering teams worked alongside alien scientists to rebuild devastated worlds. Human medical officers trained Confederacy healers in trauma surgery techniques learned from centuries of violent evolution. Human military advisors helped redesign defensive strategies based on the hard-learned lessons of survival warfare. But perhaps the most important change was psychological. The peaceful species of the Confederacy had learned that sometimes civilization needed guardians who came from darker places. Beings who understood that some threats could only be stopped by those willing to become temporarily monstrous themselves. As The combined fleets spread out across the galaxy to begin the long work of rebuilding. They carried with them a new truth. The most dangerous predators in the universe weren't the ones with the biggest teeth or the strongest claws. They were the ones who had learned to love something more than they feared death, and who would never stop fighting for the people they chose to call family. The galaxy was safe, protected by monsters who had chosen to be heroes.